Welcome to Nada Yada Island.
Next on Nada Yada Island.
I knew I deserved so much more, so I left. I finally switched to Metro and got what I was looking for.
Get one line for only $25 a month with AutoPay. Just bring your phone to Metro and experience all the data you want on the largest 5G network. That's Nada Yada Yada, only at Metro by T-Mobile.
First month is $30. Bring your number and ID. Offer not available if with T-Mobile or with Metro in the past 180 days.
Welcome to Mind Love, episode 141. Today's episode is all about breaking through fear, anxiety, and other mental blocks.
Contrary to what society teaches us, the truth is everything is created from the inside out, not outside in. Wherever you are, if you look around, everything that you see with your physical eyes was first created in someone's mind, held to as an idea until it gained thought form, and then held upon intentionally and taken action on until it literally was created in reality. So nothing is happening outside in, right? And the reason this is really important to remember is because it doesn't matter what's happening in the economy. I'm not saying deny reality, but I'm not changing my outcomes based on reality. I may change the way I'm delivering them.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
Hi, friends. First of all, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you're always updated about new episodes. Plus, subscribers and reviews are really, really helpful to me, and it's a really easy way to give back if this content is helpful to you. So I just want to give a shout out to someone who left me a recent review that really touched my heart. Katarina says, I have been listening to this podcast for a few months now. Every single episode has been so unbelievably helpful. The insight Melissa has and the authenticity is palpable. I'm grateful for this podcast, what it's helping me heal, and supporting my growth. I love this podcast. Thank you so much, Melissa. Well, thank you so much, Katarina. It means so much to me to read things like this. So if you're out there and you haven't left a review yet, I would be so appreciative if you did. But of course, sending you all my love either way. And now into the good stuff. When it comes to our goals and our dreams, most of the time we know what we really need to do, we're just not doing it. Either we talk ourselves out of it, or we procrastinate, or we chicken out, and then we spiral. Every time we manage to avoid doing those things that will move us closer to our dreams, we're building a self-belief against our own success. A belief like, I'm not fit for success, or people like me don't make it that far, or if only I came from money, I'd have a leg up, or maybe I just don't have what it takes. And it's these beliefs that subconsciously drive our lives. The crazy thing is, a lot of times, we don't even know that we have these beliefs, let alone realize that they are subconsciously dictating our entire lives. And sometimes the way these beliefs are created is more subtle than you'd think they'd be. Growing up, I knew I was going to be successful. I was the kind of kid who got straight A's and finished my work before everyone else. I was really good at taking tests. So with every new assignment, I got even more confidence. But then life happened. Traumas happened, difficult life events. I had to create my own structure instead of it being handed to me by my parents or teachers. I started building evidence for my distraction and my laziness and my ADD. So all the decisions we make create our life both directly and indirectly because we have the direct consequences and we're building these self-beliefs along the way. So here's an example. Say that you have an idea to, say, start a YouTube channel, and then you keep putting it off. Every day that you let go by that you're not taking action, you're building more evidence that you're not the type of person who takes actions on your dreams. But here's the really interesting part. Often these self-beliefs aren't new. They're just reinforcing a seed that was planted way back when we were a kid. We're being driven by a subconscious behavior that started in childhood, and then just reinforcing that belief and making it stronger over and over again throughout our lives. When I started Mind Love, it was really the first time in about a decade that I really started to break my own blocks. But it didn't start the day that I launched the podcast. I had to start rebuilding my whole self-belief system before my mindset would really even let me make progress. And it's not just something that you do once and you're golden forever. It's kind of a lifelong process. I have to have this extra sense of awareness when I'm putting things off or when I'm holding fear of my next level of success. But there's one major thing that's different. Before, I doubted myself in general. I doubted if I was capable. Now I know that self-doubt is normal and it's something that can be worked through. I know I'm capable of anything. I just need to change my perception and process my fears so that I can shift my mindset. So how do we release these blocks or even find out what they are in the first place? Wouldn't it be great if we could just choose to let go of all this baggage we've picked up over the years and start fresh? Well, that's what we're talking about today. Our guest is Mia Hewitt. She's a human potential expert, and she's co-owned and operated a 7-figure business. She's an international speaker, and she's a world-class business coach. She's also the founder of Aligned Intelligence, or AIM, which is a methodology that removes all your blind spots, fears, anxieties, and self-doubt so that you feel empowered and make better decisions overall. 3 key things we will learn are how to identify your own mental blind spots, how our egos create our own glass ceiling, and how to stop using force and start using your real power. But before we dive in, do you wish you had a little reminder to help you stay aligned each day? Just sign up for the Morning Mind Love for daily inspirational messages right to your inbox. I get messages from people every single day about how the Morning Mind Love is their favorite way to start their day, or that the message that came through is exactly what they needed to hear. It's kind of like your own personal inspiration oracle. Just visit mindlove.com and sign up right there on the homepage. Plus, you'll get some amazing free gifts when you do, like a free guided binaural affirmation meditation designed to rewire your brain to your highest self. And you'll get one of my favorite tools, a booklet of my personal power lists to help you gain clarity and live each day with intention. And it's all completely free. Just go to mindlove.com to sign up. Or if you're out and about, text the word morning to 33777. That's morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Mia Hewitt to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's going to be fun.
So first off, let's give listeners a little background on you. How did you become a coach? What led you to what you're doing now?
Absolutely. So I grew up poor. And I was like so committed at 13 years old. My dog died because our house was so infested with fleas. They literally sucked the blood out of him. And I remember making a decision at 13 that I didn't know how I was going to become wealthy, but I wasn't going to be poor. And so it was really like so adamant in me that I was going to learn how to do this, and then I would give it to the world. And so I built my first brick and mortar business. I built a multi-million-dollar brick and mortar, and then now I've done it again online. I've built a $1 million, not multi yet, but $1 million business online. So now I have actually both models. And how I got here is when I grew my first business, Melissa, I got to this point and I really thought, like, growing up poor, I had told myself for so long that if I could just become wealthy, that then like I felt like all my problems would disappear and I would be like, I don't know. I had this really weird fairy tale imaginary thing of like, I was going to stop worrying. I would have all the confidence in the world. I was going to be so like proud of myself and praise myself. And when I got there, that's not how I felt. And I remember kind of being let down, kind of like disappointed, like really is this all there is? Like I really reached a point of like questioning my life. And it wasn't that I wasn't grateful, because I know I tell this story all the time and I get some people who are like, how can you not be grateful? But it wasn't that I wasn't grateful. I just couldn't understand how I looked like a success on the outside, but inside I felt like a failure. Like I didn't feel free, right? And so I was looking for freedom. Like that's what I wanted since I was really little, always feeling like I was always trying to survive, and I didn't ever feel that way. So long story short, I went and spent about $500,000 and worked with the best in the industry. I've been coached by some amazing people. And inside of my coaching with them, ultimately they would come to a place where they would say, and I would say, well, I just don't feel like I'm getting it. Like, I know what you're saying logically, but emotionally, I don't feel that. Inevitably, they would end up saying to me, well, just think differently. Now, Melissa, if I could have thought differently, let me tell you, I would have done that a long time ago. And I didn't need to spend $500,000 to try to figure that out. Like, I was just pissed. And I remember the last guy I worked with, he just got frustrated with me. And it wasn't that I wasn't coachable. I really am. But he didn't know what to do with me. I didn't really know why it wasn't working. And I remember him saying to me, you know, Mia, you just need to go in your room and lock the door and not come out until you figure this out. And I remember thinking, like, that's like when the ghetto side of me comes out. Because, you know, I did grow up in the poor section. I remember thinking, I didn't need to pay you $1,000. Tell me that. You know, I was just so pissed. But it really was a blessing in disguise, because I became so committed that day, like really committed. I'm not an overnight success. It took me 6 years. What I can do for people in 8 weeks, it took me 6 years to uncover.
Wow. So what was it when you were sitting there and you're like, okay, I know it logically, but emotionally you don't feel it. How did you end up connecting those things? What was missing?
Oh, that's a great story. Like, that's even a great question. And it's a great story on how I got there, because and every single one of everybody I always talk to feels the exact same way. It's like they know logically what to do, but they don't know what to do, how to stop feeling emotionally how they feel. So what I uncovered was that, like, basically prior, like when we're born, we are all babies are born whole, perfect, and complete. Like, there is not one baby, Melissa, born with a self-esteem issue. Not one. And then what happens is, as a child begins to grow and explore their world, they explore, and their trust is built on a foundational emotional feeling of that trust, right? And when the trust is broken, and when that is broken, they will experience, all children will have this happen. Everybody's had this happen to them. They will experience an emotional trauma, where what it feels like is they went into an experience that they didn't even know was possible, because in their world, everything's always been for them. Everything's always like, we trusted ourselves, we trusted others, and we trusted life. And then something happens that we never saw coming, and it blindsides us, and it shocks us, confuses us, makes us feel like there must be something wrong with us. Because back then, when we're little, it happens between, I've had someone as young as 15 months, but the average is around 3 or 4 years old. I get a lot of 4-year-olds, 4 to 5, but it can happen anytime between like 15 months to 8 years. And we don't, back then when this happens, we don't think these parents that we have, that in our minds, those are God, right? Yeah. Like, they're not just parents. Like, we don't, as little kids, we don't think, oh, mom's just having a bad day. You know, she'll get over it. We don't think that way. When mom gets upset, or mom stops talking to us, or dad hits us, or dad screams, or we see something really terrifying to us and we feel terrified, we break from who we really are as a wholeness, and we become a way to survive our life, which is also called the ego. We become the smaller side of ourselves. And so then what happens to us is that emotional trauma, the reason why then, as we go through our lives from that day forward, every negative experience that we will experience from that moment on will be a deeper, bigger version of the same pattern from our original trauma. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And it is interesting, because there's certain moments when I think of childhood. And well, first of all, I first remember hearing about how childhood wounds really affect us later on in life. And it seems so simple that I remember logically kind of rejecting it for a while. But I can remember key points of, like, the first time I felt like my mom didn't have something under control, or the first time I saw my parents cry, or the first time that I felt like when somebody told me we can't afford that, and my body went to the point of, could we be homeless? Could we be that family? Like, you know, because you don't really have the scale or the spectrum of the severity of things. And so it does make so much sense that those things are still running the subconscious behaviors of our lives in the future. What do we do about it? Do we need to uncover those specific moments first before we're able to change them? Or how do we start to take back that control if we know that something like that has affected us? Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up, or text the word morning to 33777. You know what I love about the start of a new year? It's kind of like opening a fresh notebook. 365 blank pages just waiting to be filled with your story. But sometimes we get stuck trying to write that story alone. Maybe there's a chapter you've been wanting to revise, or maybe you're just ready for a whole new plot twist in 2025. But here's what I've learned from my own journey with therapy. It's kind of like having an editorial partner for your life story. Someone who helps you see the patterns that you might have missed, who gives you the tools to write stronger chapters ahead. And that's why I'm so excited about BetterHelp. They've made therapy accessible and easy, serving over 5 million people worldwide. With over 30,000 credentialed therapists, each with different specialties, you can find someone who really gets your unique story. But what I love is how flexible it is. Everything is online, and you can easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost until you find the perfect fit. And it's not just for people that are dealing with major challenges. Therapy can help anyone become the best version of themselves. So write your story with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/mindlove today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. Do we need to uncover those specific moments first before we're able to change them? Or how do we start to take back that control if we know that something like that has affected us?
Absolutely. Those are great questions, because that's exactly why who we are today, right? So I'm going to use myself. So for instance, now I'm 52, but at the time that I started really questioning all this, I was in my 30s. And I remember thinking, like, I know logically what to do, but why is it that emotionally I can't go there? Like, emotionally, I don't feel that way. And what it is emotionally, I was still 5, having that trauma all over, but consciously, right? So emotionally, that's the subconscious. Consciously, I was in my 30s. So there was a disconnect between what I understood logically and what I felt emotionally. And that's the reason why we feel this way, because we can't think greater than how we feel. Think greater than how we feel. So if we don't how we have to do this, we actually have to go back to that original trauma. And the reason I say that is because when you see that exact trauma where you created it, then you can unravel it. Because the cool thing is time is just an illusion. There's no such thing as time. There really isn't a past, and there really isn't a future. The truth is there's only now. But what we do as a way to explain something that happened is we will say there's a past. So we try to compartmentalize. But when we're feeling that, we're feeling it in the now. So the cool thing, to answer your question, is when we heal it in the now, we actually release it in the now as well. So it doesn't matter. I think the oldest person I've had so far come through my 8-week courses, a gentleman who was 69, and the youngest I've had so far is somebody who's 23. And I would say that one would say and everybody breaks free, everybody. So it's really fascinating, when you say, well, wow, that person's been, their trauma was when he happened to be 5. And it's like, oh, he's 69. So it really doesn't matter how long they've had the trauma or how, like it, right? It's not a time issue. But the reason why it works is because it's his specific trauma and it's her specific trauma. It's not like a generalization of a trauma. That's the reason why it really works, because that individual is actually going back home, so to speak. Does that make sense? They go back to who they were, the whole, complete and perfect, the way they felt prior to the trauma.
Right. It is really funny how we identify with our ego so much more than we do our true selves. It's like, because our ego's the loudest and it's the one driving a lot of our behaviors and emotions, and we're like, this is who I am. When really, if we stripped most of those things, we'd actually find who we are. It's like, that's been my biggest journey, is trying to figure out who I am beyond who I think I am. And it's pretty interesting, though, because when we're caught up in this world or society that lives in the ego-driven place, it's really hard to break free of that when you don't see other people breaking free of it either. And what I'm curious about is there were so many things that's taken me years of personal development and spiritual work to really figure out where certain things came from, certain behaviors came from. There are obvious traumas from my past, but then sometimes there's things that seem small when you speak it out loud, but it's something that affects you throughout your whole life. It's a pattern that you hold on to forever. And we dismiss them when we think back to them. How do we identify those things specific to our journey that would be the most valuable for us to learn to process and let go of?
I love that. So when we have the original trauma, happens, so whatever age we are, 4 or 5, mine was at 5, what happens is when that trauma happens and we don't know how to process how we're feeling, we don't know how to process our emotions, and we split is too hard of a word, but we feel like a disconnect and we hide who we are. We think there's something wrong with who we really are. So we hide that part and become the ego part to try to survive. What happens is that pattern then runs as an open loop in the background of our mind. So in truth, we're actually not creating all these different patterns. We're creating the same pattern over and over again with a different place, different face, different situation, but the same exact emotional feelings all over again. So we're really not creating anything ever newly, if that makes sense. We just keep regurgitating because it's all programming then. Everything that we're doing is just a programming of patterns. So what happens to us is these routine programs become 95% of it is memorized behaviors from that experience that we never want to have happen again, our emotional reactions to that experience that we never want to have happen again, our unconscious habits, our attitude we took on that day to try to never have it happen again, our beliefs and our perceptions that happened that day that we never want to have happen again. So in a sense, we then took on trying to control everything in order not to have that happen again, which only by the universal law of cause and effect creates more of the same patterns of a loss of control over and over and over again until we heal it. Once we heal that pattern, that open loop, and we close that loop, we can actually then create a new pattern and new patterns consciously and create our reality intentionally.
What's interesting is that we feel like we have this control and we feel like the harder we try, but it's the more that we create a resistance, it's like the universe meets us with its own resistance. Whereas if you were somehow to allow yourself to let go and go with the flow, you'd find yourself flowing to exactly where you needed to be. Is that right?
Yes, because the most important question we can ask ourselves when we are wanting to create anything is, who are we operating as? Our ego or our aligned self? If we're coming from ego, it's never going to pan out for us. Like, it's going to be a struggle, a fight, a resistance. The ego will never be enlightened. I just want to say that. Most people are trying to enlighten their ego. The ego is insecure. You're not, right? And so when we can really separate, like who am I operating as? What happens is we stop operating from the ego and we really start operating from our aligned self. And so what that looks like, and it's going to feel like I'm contradicting myself, but I say this all the time, but I'll explain it. What that looks like to create our reality intentionally is we become highly intentionally, right? So we decide and operate from the being of it's done. Like the other part of asking for or being intentional of what we want is the receiving of it. We have to actually expect the outcome. So we have to operate from being highly intentional, highly committed, meaning being completely letting go of how we think it should happen, but being completely committed to doing whatever it takes, but giving up that it can only be one way. So I'm very moldable, flexible. I've been an entrepreneur for 31 years and I've thrived in every market. From learning from my mistakes of like how not. So it's the flexibility and the malleableness of myself is what allows me to thrive in any market. And then, so it's highly intentional, being highly committed and completely detached. And what I mean by that is not detached on the outcome that we get to have, but really detached on not making things mean anything, letting go of trying to control the way it happens, and not taking it so serious.
So in your journey of building your businesses,
Yeah.
can you give an example of a time where, of how it actually, the process went of maybe things going completely differently or the process being completely different than you thought it would be to the outcome that you had very intentionally planned?
I love that. Okay, that's a great one. So when I started taking this on, because I am very practical, like I operate a results-based, project-based business where we operate, my team and I operate inside of 90 days. So I'm very practical. Okay. And so when I say this, I remember when I was taking this on in the very beginning, when I was making the switch from being because I grew two businesses. My first one, I grew through ego and survival, and it was not fun. You can make millions in survival for sure. People do it all the time. You do burnout and, there's been a lot of crazy things that happen from that, but you can do that. I don't suggest it, but it is totally possible. And then I've done it completely the opposite from flow. But I remember when I was bridging, when I was really starting to like let go of trying to control everything. And I really was taking on what I'm telling you right now. And I'll tell you this great story. So I remember starting to like really get the hang of creating, my reality intentionally and what it really looked like. And so I decided I was going to create $30,000 and I wanted to create it in 10 days or less. Now, I had no idea how I was going to do that. But I was going to take on that if you can create your reality, and it has nothing to do with time, which it doesn't have anything to do with time, it's an alignment issue, not a time issue. I was like, okay, let's play this. I'm going to create $30,000 in 10 days or less. That's what I said. So how I did it is, or what I did is I would go in the morning, I would get in alignment with myself. I would already see the outcome as being done. So completely intentional, committed to like whoever popped up in my mind, I was going to trust the download of exactly who I needed to reach out to. And then I was going to take action. So the first person that came to my mind, I literally went to, my phone, text the person, say, hey, you totally came to my mind this now. I don't know why, but I have a feeling like I should talk to you. They were like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Like, thank you so much for thinking about me. Got on a call with that person. She was struggling with something she hired. Okay, perfect. So then the next day I was like doing the same thing. I get into alignment. I'm like, and then this image pops into my head. And here comes my ego. So I'm just going to show you this. I'm like, there's no way she has any money to hire me. Like, this is not going to work. Okay. And I'm like, and then I literally caught myself and I was like, no, you said you were going to be highly intentional, fully committed, let go of control, detached from any meaning. And she's the one who lit up for you. You need to, okay. And I was like being a little bit of a resistant child, I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to go through the motion, but I don't know why I'm doing this. It doesn't make any sense to me. I know this girl doesn't have the money to hire me. Why am I wasting my time? So I reach out, same thing. I was on, I'm always really honest. So I said the same thing. You totally came into my mind. I have no idea why I'm calling. Why I feel the urge to reach out to you, but there's something that's saying that I need to connect with you. How are you doing? Do you have like 7 minutes to talk? So I get on the call with her. And she's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming. And she's telling me everything that's wonderful in her life. And I'm like, okay, I don't force or convince anybody of anything. So I'm like, I can't, there's nothing for me to do with her. So I'm like, I don't know why I'm on this call. I remember like literally battling in my own head back then, because I didn't really fully trust the process. And so I'm battling myself. And then right before I go to hang up I didn't realize she was in her car and the door opened. There was like some energy shift. And I remember saying, it seems like her energy shifted. I'm like, oh, is everything okay? And she's like, oh, she goes, I'm so sorry. She's like, my boyfriend just got in the car and, he's really skeptical about these kind of things. And I said, oh, awesome. I said, hey, boyfriend, because I was on speaker. I said, hey, boyfriend, can I offer you something from one, person who used to be extremely skeptical, just like you, to another? And he kind of laughed and he's like, sure. And I said, hey, you really want to get curious about all those things that you think are making you money that are not. You want to get really skeptical about those. And then he laughed and he was like, hey, I like you. I want to talk to you. So we set up a time to talk the next day, and he was the one who hired me. So I created $30,000. There was one other person right after him. I created $30,000 in 7 days. Wow. Since then, I've created a lot more than that, but like that's like the earliest memory. Now it's all from flow. Like I don't battle in my mind anymore. Yeah. I also am like, I also have a Facebook funnel, and my traffic is driven through funnels and so forth. So I'm not like reaching out to people. So that, people come into my inbox and schedule stuff on a regular basis. So, but it's fascinating to me. Right. But does that answer? It's like where you think like, oh my gosh, like you battle and you think there's no way, like, why am I getting on the call with this girl? And then I never would have I would have never in a million years known that it was going to be her boyfriend. Never.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it is really difficult to do things without being sure of the outcome sometimes. And that goes against really what it means to be an entrepreneur. You really got to work on pushing through that because you don't go into a job and people say, oh, do these 9 tasks and you're getting paid today. No, but it's also exciting because it's like, what can you think of where you can get paid soon? And so they have their pros and cons. But when you were telling him, be curious about the things that you think are making you money, what did you mean by that? I was like so engrossed in that story. You know what's crazy? After all these years of hosting Mind Love and talking to some of the world's leading experts, one of the biggest eye-openers for me has been just how much our gut affects, everything. When my gut feels good, my mind feels clearer, my intuition is stronger, and I just feel more balanced. And that's why I'm excited about Zoe, a science-backed nutrition company that is totally changing how we understand our gut health. They've created the most scientifically advanced at-home gut test and built the world's largest microbiome database. So when you get your results, you're not getting generic advice. You're getting insights about your body that other companies just don't have the data to provide. There's also just so much misleading health information out there. Food companies even pay influencers to promote ultra-processed foods as healthy. And that's why I love that Zoe relies purely on science. Real science. The randomized controlled trial showed that participants were 4 times as likely to report better sleep and more energy, all thanks to the info from the largest microbiome database on the planet. So go to Zoe.com and find out what Zoe membership could do for you. And because you listen to Mind Love, you can use the exclusive code MINDLOVE10 to get 10% off membership. As a Zoe member, you'll get an at-home test kit and personalized nutrition program to help you make smarter food choices that support your gut. That's Zoe.com. Use MindLove10 at checkout. Trust your gut. Trust Zoe. when you were telling him, be curious about the things that you think are making you money, what did you mean by that? I was like so
Yeah.
engrossed in that story.
Yeah. Well, because the fascinating thing about how life really works is we don't actually learn anything new, right? So from that ego inception, we're not really doing anything new. It really becomes the paradigm, like what actually is happening to us is that we're just reliving over and over again. And the reason why we can't create a new result is because inside of, to get something new, we would have to do something totally different. And the way the mind works is once the mind, and this is like the ego part of ourselves, once our mind decides it has a problem, it will go to work to protect the problem. So its whole job is self-preservation, survival. So the problem is that the way to actually go from a surviving mindset to a thriving mindset is an entirely different model of the world. It's not like a small different model. It's a universe different, right? I mean, and so what oftentimes, like when people, like when they first come to me, the first thing I have to help them start to let go of before we even begin is to let them know I'm going to challenge your entire paradigm of belief of what you think is true. And, success is counterintuitive. It's actually backward. If it was common sense, success would be common. So I'm going to challenge everything you think about business. I'm going to ask you to take on a beginner's mind and truly let go of the box, like really let go of the box. And then what I actually have them take on is I want you to first understand how to learn. In order for you to learn something new, you're going to have to know the difference between when you're actively listening versus passively listening. So actively listening is when it's all about when you're fully present and you're actively recreating what I'm saying and internalizing it into your mind and your emotions and your actions. Passively listening is when you're sitting back and you're like watching me on a movie screen and going, I don't agree with that. No. I know that. I know that. Or like you're either agreeing or not agreeing, you're accepting or rejecting, but either way, you're just watching, because even the acceptance when you say, oh yeah, I know that, is still not really learning anything new. You just put like what people will often do, because what I do for people is not been done. But what they'll do is they'll want to come and they'll want to put what I'm doing into a box of something else. Like I don't teach meditation, right? I don't teach a way, I actually heal. So a lot of times they'll be like, oh, like, so is this like this? And they'll want to put it in that box. And it's like, no. Like, I want you to hear why it's not. Like, take on this differently so that you can really internalize it, so that you can feel what I'm saying. The whole thing is experiential. Is that making sense, Melissa? I know it's a lot.
No, it totally is. It's interesting because it just makes me think so much about conversations that are had online these days. You don't see a lot of times where people are going onto social media and actually learning from what other people are posting. And I was doing a little women's group recently. Well, I was actually hosting a little inner circle. It's one of my membership groups, and we were talking about staying aligned while staying informed. And one of the things that I've been practicing doing is just practicing not going on social media as a platform of anything but to learn how other people experience the world. Like, what if that was your experience with social media, where every time you read a post, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this person's so wrong, or oh my gosh, I can't believe they think that, or oh my gosh, can I post what's right? And instead learn. And you don't have to learn you don't have to agree with what they're saying, but learn maybe how another human is. How can that make you better at your job? Or how can that make you a better friend or mother or whatever it is? And I love just practicing going into even just something as simple as a conversation to completely learn how the other person works instead of trying to imprint my view of the world, if that makes sense. So that's what I was just relating, that active versus passive listening to.
It's the same. It's exactly what you're saying. So I often tell people, like, I want you to take on that you've identified yourself as your mind. And the truth is you have a mind, but you're not your mind.
Yeah.
And when you can really start to put some space between that. It's really, really important, because what the mind does to protect those decisions of that, what happened to us at 4, is it will generalize, like it will take whatever someone's saying and to make it fit their model of the world, or it will distort it. It will distort something until it does fit into the model. So it's either going to generalize it, distort it, or delete it. It'll just be like, oh, no, that's not for me. That doesn't, but exactly what you were just saying, if we will just take on a neutrality and let go of making it mean anything and come from complete neutrality and curiosity, you will then do exactly what you were just saying. You will be able to see a person's perception of reality. You'll be able to see where they're really coming from. And the thing that I would just add to that is that, agreement, like when we acknowledge people, it doesn't mean agreement. I think the biggest thing the reason why the ego doesn't want to ever acknowledge anything is because to acknowledge someone, we feel that we have to be wrong and they have to be right. And what I always ask my clients to take on is that I want you to take on that acknowledgement doesn't equal agreement. It just means you really acknowledge wholeheartedly from neutrality and curiosity that this is what was their experience. That's what was real for them. But it doesn't mean that we're agreeing so that someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong. Does that make sense?
Totally. And it's interesting too, because it's like, what does being right even really get us? Like we think that the more conversations we can go into and prove our side correct, that we're going to be like stepping up this ladder, when really it's kind of the opposite. The more that we can go in and be affected by what somebody else says and learn a little bit, whether or not that means about their opinion or just about how they are, that's when we're actually growing and kind of moving up a ladder. But we think we're going to get like some ultimate satisfaction when really it's just a blip where you might have created more resistance between you and that person, you and who you could be. Maybe you're building up your walls even thicker so that it keeps you from expanding into a fuller version of yourself.
Absolutely. Because when we identify, like really what that is the ego part of ourselves. And what we've done is we've, created an attachment to an identity to that's who we are. So so to say that we're wrong makes it feel like we're going to die. The ego is going to die. It feels like it's death to be wrong, right? It's not like it's just going to be like, really acknowledging someone else. It's like we're going to die because we've attached our identity to our mind. And when we can just really just like look lovingly at it and not really make it mean anything, the quicker we can do that, right? The quicker what we get is anytime we're feeling stuck, stopped, or frustrated, kind of going back full circle to why I said that to him, why he should get really, really, really start to, get skeptical about those things, is because anytime then that wherever we get stopped, stuck, or frustrated or struggling, any negative emotion, it always means that there is something that we are not seeing that is a blind spot. It's always showing us where our growth really is. Always.
That makes me feel really good, because one of the practices that I've done, that I've taken up during this whole lockdown process, I've created a new routine that one of my spiritual mentors, Gary Temple Bodley, taught me about. Just every night, choose one time during the day that you experienced a negative or a positive emotion. And if it was a negative emotion, what was the limiting belief underneath that? And then to process it by basically writing out anything that you can to prove that thing wrong. And so I've just taken up this little habit of trying to identify limiting beliefs, and sometimes really mundane moments of the day, but sometime that I felt badly, or that I felt fear, or that I felt anxiety. What was behind that? And it's funny because being in a situation where we're kind of locked down, there's not a ton of these, as he calls them, manifestation events happening throughout the day. and so I've got to pick really small things, which has been a really big blessing, because you don't realize how much these things affect you. It's like we acknowledge the big things that cause some big trauma, like a death in our life or like losing something big, but we don't really see how we're just relating to the world on a day-by-day basis with those mundane things. And so it's been a practice that's been really interesting, but you basically reiterated it in a way that feels a little bit more grounded than he explained it. So when we find those mental blind spots, what's your process for processing out of those so that they don't continue to subconsciously rule our behavior?
Yeah, that's a great question. They're always going to be linked to our trauma. Like when you go down deep enough into them, every single one will be completely your trauma over and over again. You just have to go deeper into the hole of it, like deeper down that rabbit hole. But basically, to answer your question, is my aligned intelligence method, what I help people do by them learning how to clear away the things that are all like whatever is stopping them getting stuck or triggered, anything that's happening, is the first thing they want to do is begin to pull back and learn to self-observe, right? So when they're observing themselves so that they can gain access and awareness. So they're going to pull back and you're going to ask yourself, like, what am I making this mean? Like, why am I triggered here? Like, why is this upsetting me? Why do I feel overwhelmed? Or why am I feeling stuck? Or why am I triggered? Or why am I struggling? You're just going to ask, what am I making this mean? And then this is the detachment from the mind, because you have to be able to detach from the identity of the ego to really get the truth of this. So you just detach and be this neutral observer, and you separate the truth from the lie. Because for the negative emotion to be experienced, it contains a lie. Right? So we have to clear the misunderstanding or the misconception that's in the way, that's holding the lie in place. So you just ask yourself, what's the truth and what's the lie? Usually the lie is the one I start with first, because it's the reason, it's usually the most they're closest to, because they're triggered. So I'll say, well, what's the lie about this? And then in order to see, when you pull back, you can go, like, okay, well, the lie is, and then they'll literally go into like why, and then I'll ask them to go deeper in it. Why is that a lie? They'll see the lie, and then I'll ask them, why is that a lie? So they can really internalize the understanding. So it's not just about coping. We're not building a coping mechanism. We're actually clearing what's in the way so that we return to homeostasis or alignment within ourselves. So this isn't a coping mechanism in any way. So we clear, what's the truth? What's the lie? Why is that a lie? And then like, what's the truth if we haven't done that yet? What's the truth about this? And then, I'll go into that a little bit more. What do you have to let go of? Because in order to get what you want, like you can't stay on the shore and get into the ocean. You're not going to stay at doing the behaviors of six figures as a business owner and get 7 figures returns. You're going to have to let go of being a solopreneur and really start building a team, because the truth is there's no self-made millionaire that didn't have a team. So it's about like letting go of control. Like you have to let go. For some people, it's letting go of that they have to be the superstar. Like, the reason I can create 7 and 8 figure businesses is because I don't have any need to be the superstar. But if I have and this is subconscious, right? But most people aren't aware of it. But if I have linked that my desire to build success to an identity that needs to be recognized, because that's where I think I'm getting my value from, then I'm not going to be able to let go of control to hire A players and people who are better than me, because that would threaten my identity, right? So we have to like really go into like, what's the lie? What do I have to let go of until we can get to a feeling of neutrality, right? When we know we've cleared the misunderstanding and misconception, because we will feel a no thing, a nothing, like a neutrality. And that's how we know we're free. And then once we're there in that neutrality, you can always then reflect, how was this more of my core trauma? Because it's always going to be inside of that core trauma. But then inside of that, what is it from there? What's the acceptance of truth that I have here? What do I have to accept? And then how am I going to apply this truth and go all in? Meaning like all in. Like, how do I want to feel? And really go all in emotionally as I command my mind as the tool that it is, such that I'm back emotionally into how I want to feel, feeling free, feeling fully me, feeling totally honoring myself, valuing myself, having that as my true emotional set point. And then I ask myself, all right, what are the actions I need to take from here? Because it's alignment first and then action. Does that make sense? I know that's a lot, but
No, it totally does. I'm just like taking my own notes.
Okay, good.
One thing that's come up with people a lot where they've reached out and they're asking about, a lot of my listeners are budding entrepreneurs or they are entrepreneurs. And the time that we're living in right now has been a different experience of this entrepreneurship, because I think for a lot of people, because there's so much unknown about even like when restrictions are going to loosen up, what our future looks like, what's happening, that it's hard to be really intentional about an outcome with your business. And so I'm even struggling with it a little bit now, where I find it much easier to procrastinate or go really slow. And I guess also I'm pregnant and I'm dealing with a ton of fatigue. And so I've been having to process a lot of the emotions of like, oh my God, I feel so lazy. Like, is it lockdown? It's like, no, you're pregnant and you're dealing with it. So whatever. But I know that several people have reached out with that same thing, where it's just like, how do you get the motivation with all that we're going through? I was so motivated before all of this happened, and now it just feels like that's dwindling. Do you have any advice for people around that?
Yes. So the first thing I want to say is, contrary to what society teaches us, the truth is everything is created from the inside out, not outside in. So what I mean by that is, wherever you are right now, and even wherever you're listening in from, if you look around to wherever you are, if you're in a building or in your car, wherever you are, if you look around, everything that you see with your physical eyes was first created in someone's mind, held to as an idea until it gained thought form, and then held upon intentionally and taken action on until it literally was created in reality. So nothing is happening outside in, nothing, right? And the reason this is really important to remember is because it doesn't matter what's happening in the economy. I'm not saying deny reality. I'm definitely always aware of where everything is and how people are being impacted. But I'm not changing my outcomes based on reality. I may change the way I'm delivering them. So for instance, I had a client, I do a lot of online businesses. They come work with me, online business owners, and I have a few brick and mortars, probably 5 brick and mortars. And I know one in particularly, like she had a paint store, right, where you would come in and paint, and that's what and right before when this hit, before it became big, before it had spread all through New York, where it came in, just when it was just a little bit in the US, I immediately said to her, you're going to need to go online. Like, this is going to shift. I had been telling her that her business model should be online anyway, because she could make a lot more money with less effort, because her overhead wouldn't be high. But she didn't want to really change that, which I totally respect. I'm just giving you, I'm not attached to anything, so I'm just going to tell you the truth. If you don't want to take it, it's okay with me, right? I'm only here to help people, to the degree they want to really, utilize their potential. But anyway, this came, and I said, you're gonna have to go online. And because she went online way before it became a big thing, I mean, she's thriving, like hugely successful online in painting. And that's just one of many. I could give you a zillion of those stories, but just to, even not only in my own, of the 5 people I've coached, because they've all been successful, but even just hearing of, different people who around the United States who immediately shift the deliverables and the way they did. So they didn't change, like the outcome was still the same. They just repurposed it or repackaged it or did it differently. So the flexibility is what it's required. So to answer your question twofold, it's not about denying reality, but really understanding that reality is created twice, once in the mind and then internalized in the emotions, and then held to consistently, intentionally, and until it's materialized in reality. So it's actually created twice. And if you can remember that it's actually an inside out world, not an outside in, you're so far ahead of the game.
Wow, there was so much wisdom in all of that. And I am probably going to go back and re-listen to this episode. but thank you so much for everything that you shared today. I know that I can just feel the wisdom in the business building and the understanding of reality. So for listeners that are interested in working with you or learning more about you, where's the best place for them to connect with you online?
Awesome. Well, they can always go to my website. It's Mia Hewitt, and it's HEWETT.com. But I also would like to gift them my free book. So you can, just for your listeners, so there's a special link. They would have to go to, otherwise there's a charge for it everywhere else. But if they go to this link, it'll be for free. They can download it, the ebook for free. It's MiaMeantForMoreBook.com. And it'll ask for a password, and all they have to do is put in, it's all one word, free book, capital F, free book, all one word. And they can download the ebook for free. It really is the best thing. The book, I wrote this book because it was the book that I wish somebody had written for me a long time ago. I really share just fundamental truths. It's only truths in that book. And it's just packed full of truths. And I tell it through my own story. So I call myself in the book, my younger version, Sue, not to confuse the reader. And then Mia is who I am, obviously today. So it's a journey. If I could have had who I am today, coach my younger self, this is what I would have wanted. And I tell it in that way such that people can read it and they can hear them from themselves. So that's why I get so many people say, oh my gosh, I felt like you wrote my story, because I really wanted the book that people could decide of really listening, right? And really being able to actively really get the value that I wanted them to get. I didn't want them to just be reading it as a movie screen. I wanted them to really get it for themselves. And so I wrote the book that I wish somebody would have given to me a long time ago.
All the links from this episode will be at mindlove.com/141. So this week, I want you to think about where you're holding yourself back. What's something big that you want to accomplish that fear's getting in the way? And fear doesn't always feel like straight up fear. Sometimes it can be doubt. Sometimes it can be procrastination. Sometimes it's just laziness and putting things off. The root cause of those things tend to be fear. Fear that you'll be able to handle your success, fear that you'll be able to accomplish it in the first place. One of the biggest mindset blocks for me is it's really hard to get into the groove of the work if I'm not 100% confident that the work's going to pay off. Am I just going to waste a bunch of time? Are people going to listen? Are people going to find me? Will this be worth my time and effort, especially with all the other stuff going on? But what we humans tend to do is let these thoughts ruminate, which just makes them stronger. And that's what causes them to dictate our lives. It takes bringing attention to them, calling these things out. Sometimes it's as simple as saying it out loud to hear how ridiculous it sounds. There's a phrase that I love, name it to tame it. So sometimes it's just bringing a voice to these fears and these anxieties that allow us to see what's actually underneath the surface. Sounds kind of counterintuitive. You'd think that bringing a voice to it might make it stronger, but it's bringing that voice to it that's the first step to being able to reform that belief or consciously creating the opposite belief. So let me know how it goes. Share this podcast on Instagram by just taking a screenshot and tagging MindLoveMelissa, and let me know what you're working through. And if you ask me a question, I'll answer it on an Instagram story. So it's a little free mindset coaching. And as a reminder, one of the best ways to help this podcast, other than joining the premium membership, is by sharing the podcast with a friend or family member or coworker, or sharing it on a public platform like Instagram or Facebook. And if you want to go one step further, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best ways to help the podcast grow. It helps me get even better guests and higher profile guests, which obviously helps me grow the show. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.